The room was quiet in the way only midnight can be quiet, when even the city seems to breathe more slowly, and Arjun sat on the edge of his bed staring at a phone that no longer held anything new for him. The screen had gone dark, but his thumb still hovered where the refresh button used to be, as if his body had not yet received the message that there was nothing left to scroll. He noticed how strange that felt, how the mind could already be tired while the hand still waited for one more distraction, one more excuse not to sit with itself. Arjun was 27, old enough to feel late and young enough to still pretend he had time. His life, from the outside, looked acceptable, maybe even successful by modern standards. He had a job that paid on time, friends who sent memes daily, and parents who proudly told relatives that he was settled. But inside him, something felt unsettled in a quieter, more uncomfortable way. Not pain exactly, and not sadness either. Just a constant low-level noise that followed him everywhere, like a fan running in the background of his mind that never switched off. He lay back and stared at the ceiling, noticing how his thoughts moved faster in silence. During the day, the noise of work, notifications, and conversations kept everything blurred together. But at night, when nothing demanded his attention, the questions returned gently but persistently. Why did he feel tired even after doing nothing meaningful? Why did his days feel full but empty at the same time? Why did he keep promising himself that tomorrow would be different, while secretly knowing it would probably be the same? This had been going on for months, maybe years, though it was hard to tell because time itself had started to feel strange. Weeks passed quickly, but the days felt repetitive, like the same scene replayed with minor changes. Wake up, check phone, rush through work, scroll during breaks, scroll after dinner, scroll before sleep, and then wonder why sleep came with restlessness instead of rest. That night, instead of reaching for his phone again, Arjun did something unusual. He stood up, walked to the small bookshelf near his desk, and pulled out a thin, slightly worn book that had been sitting there untouched for over a year. He had bought it during a phase when he believed buying books counted as growth. The cover was simple, and the title spoke of a man who had walked away from everything he owned to search for something invisible. At the time, Arjun had smiled at the idea and placed the book on the shelf, convinced that such stories were inspiring but impractical. Now, with nothing else holding his attention, he opened it. He did not read with urgency. There was no goal to finish a chapter or extract a lesson. He read slowly, almost reluctantly, letting the words pass through him instead of over him. The story spoke of ambition, exhaustion, success that felt hollow, and a life that looked impressive while quietly falling apart inside. Arjun felt an uncomfortable recognition, not because his life matched the details, but because the emotion beneath them felt familiar. At some point, he stopped reading and simply sat there, the book resting open in his hands. A line echoed in his mind, not as advice, but as a question. What if the tiredness he felt was not from doing too much, but from doing too little of what mattered? The thought did not arrive dramatically. It came softly, almost shyly, and that made it harder to ignore. The next morning, Arjun woke up later than usual. His phone alarm had rung, but he had dismissed it without opening any apps, which itself felt like a small rebellion. As he brushed his teeth, he noticed his reflection longer than he usually did. Not with judgment, but with curiosity. His eyes looked fine, his face looked fine, but something behind the eyes felt distant, as if he had been living slightly behind himself for a long time. At work, he tried something different. During his lunch break, instead of scrolling, he stepped outside the building and walked without headphones. The city felt louder than he remembered, but also more real. He noticed the uneven pavement, the way people walked quickly without looking at each other, the way his own mind kept trying to escape the moment by planning or replaying conversations. Each time it drifted, he brought it back gently, not forcefully, just noticing. That evening, he returned to the book. As the days passed, the book became less of something he read and more of something he sat with. The character in the story felt less like a hero and more like a mirror held at a slight angle. What stayed with Arjun was not the dramatic transformation, but the quiet moments before it, the moments where someone realizes that the life they are living no longer feels like their own. One night, after reading for a while, Arjun closed the book and spoke out loud for the first time in days. He said, "I am tired," not as a complaint, but as a statement of fact. Saying it felt grounding, like finally naming a condition instead of hiding from it. He realized that most of his exhaustion came from resistance, from constantly pushing himself to stay distracted, productive, entertained, and available, even when he felt empty. He began to notice patterns. The urge to check his phone whenever he felt bored, the way he avoided silence because it made him restless, the habit of measuring his worth by comparison instead of clarity. None of these felt like moral failures anymore. They felt like habits, learned responses to a world that rewarded noise and speed. A few days later, while visiting his parents, Arjun found himself sitting on the balcony with his uncle Ravi, a man in his late 40s who spoke very little but seemed unusually calm. Ravi had once worked in a high-pressure corporate job and left it without much explanation, choosing a simpler consulting role instead. At family gatherings, people often described him as wasted potential, though Ravi never seemed bothered by the label. As they sat watching the evening sky darken, Ravi said something that stayed with Arjun long after the conversation ended. He said, "Most people think discipline is about forcing yourself to do things. But real discipline is about deciding what not to do anymore." He said it casually, without emphasis, as if he were talking about the weather. That sentence lingered in Arjun's mind for days. He began experimenting, not with big changes, but with small acts of subtraction. He left his phone in another room while eating. He chose one task at work and gave it his full attention instead of juggling 5 half-heartedly. He went to bed without watching anything, letting the discomfort of silence rise and fall on its own. None of this made him instantly happier. In fact, some days felt more uncomfortable than before. But beneath the discomfort, there was something new, a sense of space. The constant pressure to be stimulated began to loosen. And in that looseness, he felt more present, even when present felt awkward. One night, lying in bed without his phone, Arjun noticed his breathing. It was shallow at first, uneven, as if his body was still alert, waiting for input. Slowly, it softened. His thoughts did not disappear, but they slowed enough for him to see them instead of being dragged by them. For the first time in a long while, he fell asleep without distraction, not deeply, but honestly. As weeks passed, the changes remained subtle. There was no dramatic transformation, no moment where everything suddenly made sense. But there was a growing awareness, a quiet understanding that clarity was not something to be found later, after success or recognition, but something to be practiced now, in small, ordinary moments. One evening, Arjun returned to the final pages of the book and paused before finishing it. He realized that the value of the story was not in following the same path, but in recognizing the same questions. What am I chasing? What am I avoiding? And what would happen if I stopped running for a while? He closed the book gently and placed it back on the shelf, not as something completed, but as something integrated. That night, as he turned off the lights, the room felt quieter than usual. Not empty, just calm. The noise had not vanished, but it no longer dominated him. And for the first time in a long time, Arjun felt that he was no longer waiting for life to begin somewhere else. It had already started, right here, in the silence he once avoided. And in that silence, something steady and unforced began to grow. The silence did not stay perfect. Arjun noticed that after a few calm days, the old habits tried to return quietly, not as strong urges but as familiar suggestions. Just 5 minutes on the phone, his mind whispered, "You deserve a break. Just check once." He realized then that distraction was not loud or aggressive. It was polite. It waited patiently for moments of weakness, moments when the mind felt slightly tired or unsure. Instead of fighting it, Arjun started observing it. Each time he felt the pull, he paused and asked himself what he was actually trying to escape from. Sometimes it was boredom. Sometimes it was anxiety about the future. Sometimes it was nothing specific at all, just an uneasiness with being still. This awareness did not remove the urge instantly, but it softened it, like turning down the volume on background noise. One evening after work, he sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the traffic below move in predictable patterns. Red lights, green lights, people stopping, starting, rushing, waiting. He realized his life had begun to resemble that rhythm, moving constantly without asking why. He thought about how often he reacted instead of choosing, how many decisions were made on autopilot simply because they were familiar. That night, instead of reading, he took out a notebook and wrote one simple sentence. What kind of life would feel quiet inside, even if the outside stayed noisy? He did not try to answer it immediately. He left the page open, letting the question exist without resolution. Over the next few days, small memories surfaced. Moments from college when he had enjoyed learning for its own sake, mornings when he woke up excited not because something impressive awaited him, but because his mind felt clear. He noticed that those memories shared one thing in common. He had been fully present in them, not split between screens, expectations, and comparisons. At work, Arjun began arriving 10 minutes earlier than usual, not to work more, but to sit quietly before the day began. At first, this felt pointless. He simply sat at his desk, hands folded, noticing his breath and the gradual hum of the office waking up. But slowly, this small ritual became an anchor. The day no longer started in chaos. It started with awareness. One afternoon, his manager asked him why he seemed calmer lately. The question surprised him because he had not felt dramatically different. He simply felt less rushed inside. He smiled and said he had been trying to do fewer things at the same time. The manager laughed and said, "If everyone did that, half the meetings would disappear." The comment stayed with Arjun longer than the laughter. That evening, he met his friend Kunal for dinner, someone he had known since school. Kunal spoke passionately about promotions, side hustles, and the pressure to stay ahead. Arjun listened carefully, noticing how familiar the anxiety sounded. At one point, Kunal asked him, "Don't you ever feel like you're falling behind?" Arjun paused before answering, feeling the weight of the question. Then he said honestly, "Sometimes. But lately, I feel like I'm finally catching up to myself." The words surprised both of them. Walking home later, Arjun reflected on how often he had measured his life against timelines that were not his own. Success by 30. Stability by 35. Clarity sometime after that. No one had questioned where these timelines came from. They were absorbed quietly, like background radiation, shaping decisions without ever being examined. That night, he returned to the notebook and wrote again, this time more freely. He wrote about his fear of being ordinary, his exhaustion from pretending he was fine, his constant urge to prove something to people who were not watching as closely as he imagined. Writing felt strange at first, but then relieving, as if thoughts that had been circling endlessly finally found a place to land. As weeks passed, Arjun did not become disciplined in the way social media described discipline. He did not wake up at 5 every day or overhaul his entire routine. What changed was subtler. He began choosing fewer commitments and honoring them fully. He stopped saying yes automatically and started listening to the feeling behind the request. His phone usage decreased naturally, not because of rules, but because it no longer offered what he was looking for. The endless scrolling felt flat compared to the depth of quiet moments. He still used his phone, still enjoyed conversations and content, but the compulsive edge softened. One morning, while waiting for a train, Arjun noticed how people around him stood together yet alone, eyes fixed on screens, shoulders tense. He felt a wave of compassion rather than judgment. He realized that everyone was carrying their own version of noise, their own unspoken tiredness. The world was not broken, just overwhelmed. That realization shifted something inside him. He stopped seeing his own confusion as a personal flaw and started seeing it as a shared human experience. This did not excuse inaction, but it removed the shame that often accompanied self-reflection. Late one night, unable to sleep, Arjun revisited the question in his notebook. What kind of life would feel quiet inside? This time, an answer formed gently. A life where his actions aligned with his values. A life with space for thought, rest, and honest effort. A life where success was not loud but stable. He understood then that clarity was not a destination but a practice. It was something built slowly, through attention, restraint, and patience. There was no final version of himself waiting to be discovered, only a direction to move toward. As he lay in bed, listening to the faint sounds of the city, Arjun felt a sense of groundedness he had not known before. The noise still existed, both outside and within, but it no longer defined him. He was learning to listen without being pulled, to act without rushing, to exist without constant stimulation. And in that steady, unremarkable progress, he found something far more valuable than motivation. He found trust in his own pace. As Arjun's inner pace slowed, he began noticing a different kind of tiredness rising to the surface, one that had been hidden beneath distraction for years. This was not the fatigue of long hours or poor sleep. It was emotional fatigue, the exhaustion that comes from constantly holding yourself together, from presenting a version of yourself that feels acceptable while quietly suppressing what you actually feel. When the noise faded, this tiredness finally had room to speak. Some evenings, after work, Arjun would sit alone and feel an unexpected heaviness settle in his chest. There was no clear reason for it, no specific problem to fix. It was simply there, a residue of years spent moving forward without checking whether the direction still made sense. He understood then why so many people avoided stillness. Silence does not just bring peace. It also brings truth. Instead of reaching for his phone, Arjun let the feeling exist. He noticed how his body reacted, the slight tightening in his shoulders, the shallow breath. He stayed with it, reminding himself that discomfort was not danger. Slowly, the heaviness softened, not because it was solved, but because it was acknowledged. During this period, memories from a past relationship began resurfacing. The breakup had happened over a year ago, yet it had never truly been processed. Back then, he had handled it efficiently, at least on the surface. He stayed busy, avoided long conversations, and convinced himself that time would take care of it. Time had passed, but the understanding had not followed. One night, sitting with his notebook, Arjun finally wrote about her. He wrote about the way they had drifted apart without dramatic conflict, about how both of them were tired in different ways, and about the quiet sadness of realizing that love alone was not enough to carry two exhausted people forward. As he wrote, there was no bitterness, only clarity. The relationship had not failed. It had ended when it could no longer grow. This realization brought an unexpected sense of relief. For the first time, Arjun felt compassion for his past self, the version of him who did the best he could with the awareness he had then. He stopped judging himself for moving on too quickly or for holding on too long. Both were part of learning. Around this time, Arjun noticed a shift in how he viewed ambition. Earlier, ambition had felt like pressure, a constant demand to become more, earn more, and prove more. Now, he began to see it differently. Ambition, he realized, was not the enemy. Misaligned ambition was. Chasing goals that did not reflect his values had drained him far more than hard work ever could. At work, this insight led to small but meaningful changes. He started focusing on the parts of his job that required thought and creativity, rather than just speed. He communicated more clearly, set boundaries around his availability, and stopped equating urgency with importance. To his surprise, his performance improved. Clarity made him effective in ways constant effort never had. One afternoon, while cleaning his room, Arjun came across old notebooks from his college years. The pages were filled with ideas, reflections, and questions he had once found fascinating. Reading them felt like meeting an earlier version of himself, someone curious, thoughtful, and unafraid of uncertainty. He realized that this version had not disappeared. It had simply been buried under years of noise. That night, he sat on the floor, leaning against his bed, and reflected on identity. For a long time, he had defined himself by roles, job titles, and expectations. But those identities felt fragile, easily shaken by comparison or failure. What if identity, he wondered, was not something fixed, but something practiced? What if it was shaped daily by the choices he made when no one was watching? This thought stayed with him. It shifted his focus from outcome to process, from image to integrity. He became more interested in how he lived his days than in how they appeared from the outside. As the months passed, Arjun's life did not become extraordinary. It became intentional. He woke up with less resistance, worked with more presence, and rested without guilt. He still experienced doubt and distraction, but they no longer dictated his behavior. He had learned to pause before reacting, to choose response over impulse. One evening, while sitting on his balcony, he noticed the same quiet he had felt weeks earlier. But now it felt deeper, more settled. The city was still alive below him, full of movement and urgency. But inside him, there was space. Space to think, space to feel, and space to simply be. He understood then that inner silence was not the absence of thoughts, but the absence of being controlled by them. It was the ability to hear the noise without losing yourself in it. As Arjun stood there, breathing in the cool night air, he felt a sense of alignment that had been missing for years. Not excitement, not achievement, but something steadier. A quiet confidence that he was moving in a direction that felt honest. And in that moment, he realized that the most meaningful changes in life rarely announce themselves loudly. They arrive softly, through attention, patience, and the courage to stay present. This was not the end of his journey. It was the beginning of living it consciously. With time, Arjun stopped thinking of his inner changes as a phase and began treating them as a way of living. This shift mattered, because phases end, but ways of living depend. He no longer waited for motivation to arrive before acting. He acted gently, consistently, even on days when clarity felt distant. Those days still came, quieter but persistent, reminding him that growth was not a straight line but a rhythm. Some mornings, he woke up feeling heavy again, unsure of direction, wondering if all this awareness was leading anywhere concrete. Earlier, such mornings would have pushed him back into distraction. Now, he treated them differently. He slowed down. He reduced expectations for the day. He focused on doing the next simple thing well, trusting that momentum did not need force. During one such morning, as rain tapped softly against his window, Arjun realized something important. Most of his suffering had come not from failure, but from resistance to uncertainty. He had wanted guarantees before commitment, clarity before action, confidence before movement. Life, he understood now, did not work that way. Clarity often followed action, not the other way around. This realization softened his relationship with the future. He stopped demanding answers from it. Instead, he focused on alignment in the present. Was he acting in a way that respected his energy? Was he paying attention to what mattered? Was he choosing depth over noise when given the option? These questions guided him better than any long-term plan ever had. As weeks turned into months, people around Arjun noticed subtle changes. Friends said he seemed more grounded. His parents noticed he listened more than he spoke. At work, colleagues trusted his judgment because he no longer rushed to fill silence with opinions. He did not become louder or more assertive. He became clearer, and clarity carried its own authority. One evening, while reorganizing his room, Arjun picked up the same book that had quietly started this journey. He flipped through a few pages, noticing how differently the words landed now. Earlier, the ideas had felt aspirational, almost distant. Now, they felt familiar, not because he had mastered them, but because he had lived alongside them. He smiled gently and placed the book back, grateful not for the story itself, but for the space it had opened. That night, lying in bed, Arjun reflected on how much had changed without anything dramatic happening. No major promotion, no sudden breakthrough, no radical lifestyle shift. Yet inside him, something fundamental had rearranged itself. He was no longer chasing silence. He was living from it. The noise still visited him. The phone still buzzed. The world still demanded speed and comparison. But he had learned something crucial. He did not have to follow every call. Attention, he realized, was his most precious resource, and where he placed it shaped the quality of his life. As sleep approached, Arjun felt a sense of quiet completeness. Not because everything was resolved, but because he was no longer at war with himself. He had accepted that life would always contain uncertainty, effort, and occasional confusion. But it would also contain presence, meaning, and calm if he chose to meet it that way. In that stillness, he understood what true discipline felt like. Not rigidity, not control, but devotion. Devotion to awareness. Devotion to simplicity. Devotion to the small daily choices that, over time, created a life that felt honest. And as the room faded into darkness, Arjun did not reach for his phone. He rested instead, trusting the silence he had once feared. This is Mind Vault, a quiet place for deeper listening, where clarity is not forced and growth is allowed to unfold at its own pace. If this story stayed with you, let it stay gently. There is nothing here to rush, nothing here to prove, just space to breathe, reflect, and continue your own journey with a little more awareness than before. And somewhere between the noise and the silence, that is often where life truly begins.